Okay, hello. Nick, welcome to the pod place. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm once again so grateful for my community because you all get me. And I was like, Nick, I need to interview you. It's a last minute thing. But your story again, I know so many of your stories when I get you guys on here, but I just love giving you a platform to share it because I think, and you mentioned this, it is a really healing process to share our stories. And I think yours is again different. And this is what I'm loving. We can just bring in all these different perspectives. And Nick, I'll just give a little bit of a intro so that everyone listening knows who you are. So you live on the beautiful Sunshine Coast and you have two gorgeous boys, Maverick and Tennyson. Tennyson is your older boy and he is 5, nearly 6. And Mav is 2. Is that correct?
He is
Mav is
too.
your deaf son. Yeah. And Mav is, well, he has had a really beautiful start to his journey. And I think we were talking about this before we came on air that this is going to be a really lovely conversation for people to understand how these early years should go. And I think this will be really nice to highlight some of those elements in your journey around Maverick and you navigating that because I think you are such a powerhouse and you do so much for your kids. And I know that you may not say that about yourself, but I really do believe that. And so I'm just so grateful to have you on here to share your story. And I think we'll start where we always start. And everyone knows we like to have our little routine on the pod plays. Back at the beginning with when you finally found out that Maverick was deaf. I guess what was going through your mind? How old was he? Sort of how did that all unfold?
Yeah, so it feels like a lifetime ago actually, but it was only 2 years ago. But he was so when were we? He was born just before 40 weeks and born healthy. Everything was fine. Um, and then he did get taken to special care like 24 hours afterwards and spent 24 hours there. But none of this is directly related to his deafness that we're aware of. Um, and then we did the newborn hearing screening in the hospital. And it's funny because I do sit a little bit nervous and anxious and like to be heavily involved. And I don't even know if I got out of the bed. Like, I remember taking the photo from the edge of the bed and I was just like, oh, yeah, like, done this before with my first son. They put the little things on. I took the photo to tick the box. So both kids have the photo. And then sat back down and then he didn't pass. And one thing I'm noticing is like listening to this podcast and in the RB club and in the bilingual space that we're in is failed gets used a lot. And I actually don't think they said failed for Maverick. And I got the brochure out recently when I was thinking about it and it says refer. And I don't know if that's like maybe things are slowly changing. Maybe this space, like we're getting the changes in that we are fighting for. And because I remember saying he referred, and I was like referred, what does that mean? Um, but then it kind of took the typical pathway. So Maverick was born in an hour and 1 minute, so
Wow.
very rapidly. And in that time he spent in special care, he had a chest X-ray and did have fluid on his lungs. So you can imagine. Then came it's he was born rapidly. It probably still got fluid in there. We'll just have to redo it in a week. And so off she went. And you don't. I don't know how we know these things, but in hindsight, I obviously overthought it, like I generally do. But I started doing weird things in the hospital room, like clapping the cutlery above his head, and all of the things. I'm like, and I'm anxious, and I worried about lots of things pre him coming into the world, but deafness was never one of them. And I actually Maverick was planned, but at about 7 or 8 weeks pregnant, with my psychologist, remember saying to her, "What if this child has a disability or something wrong with him, and it takes me away from Tennyson?" Um, and I don't know how I knew these things. It's all that hindsight, intuition. I don't know. But anyway, I started clapping cutlery, doing all the things, and kind of thinking like, "Oh, is he going to be deaf? Like, can he hear me?" type of thing. And then my husband, I remember so vividly him standing at the end of the bed that afternoon when he came in, holding Maverick, rocking him, and I said, he didn't pass the newborn hearing screening. Like, what if he's deaf? And me and my husband are on complete different spectrums. So he's a wing it, deal with things as they come, not a warrior. And he looked at me and just rolled his eyes and said, "He's not deaf," because I worry about everything all the time. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, he's not deaf. Like, you don't believe he's deaf. It's fine. But I went home and I just couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a like fluid on the ears thing. And over that week, between coming back for the next one, we were popping balloons above his head. Tennyson's the loudest child on earth and was squealing, slamming doors, all of things. Maverick never flinched and he didn't startle. And I remember saying to family members, oh, he's not startling. And they were like, oh, I don't think my child startled either. And I kept saying, yeah, but no, they should. They should. And I was already fighting this, like, the battles we fight in terms of not people not being dismissive at all, but trying to be reassuring. But I knew, I just knew that something was wrong. And then we went back a week later. And by that stage, I was really anxious, wanted answers, wanted to know, sleep deprived, hormonal, all the things postpartum. And we went into that testing, and you know how like it's so much pressure, you got to have them to sleep, all of the stress and lugging 2 kids down to the hospital. It was just so much. And I was so highly strung. And then they're about to do it, and he just woke up as like they were doing the button stuff. And she didn't press pause in time. And so he referred on human error. And she's like, oh, we can't do it again. We'll have to wait another week. And I lost it. I burst into like ugly crying. Like, I can't do another week of this. Like, I just want answers. I just want to know. And she was so apologetic and stuff like that. She's like, and I don't know why they can't do it for another week.
Yeah, no,
Like,
that's actually quite new to me as well. I've never
I was like, can we come back tomorrow? Like, I'll be here tomorrow, 9 a.m. Like, I don't want another week of wondering. Anyway, so we waited another week. So we went in for that 3rd newborn hearing screening. And that one was successful, but he referred. And so then I remember she kind of just said, like, here's a pamphlet. All those bloody pamphlets start flying at you. Oh. And gave me a pamphlet and said, like, an audiologist will be in contact. You'll go for further testing. And I remember I actually have the pamphlet, but I hate, there's one statistic in there that I'm sure says, like, what does it say? A bit like out of every 10 babies tested by an audiologist, and then there's a few different options, but only one's about to have is found to have a permanent hearing loss. And I remember them harping on about, like, and really dismissively. Yeah, like, it's really rare. It's really rare. And I now hate statistics because we fell into that rare pathway. And it gets played down, and they make you feel like you shouldn't worry or think about it. And so that happened, and then started those bigger audiology testing. So I think we did 3 sessions at 3 hours each. We didn't quite do the 3 hours on the last one, but Maverick is bilateral, so I had to do all of that extensive stuff on both sides, which I think they would probably do at a newborn screening anyway, wouldn't they? Both sides. Yeah. So we did that, and then in the first session, it was the first session. Yeah, she said she'd done the left, and I remember just turning to us and saying, like, unfortunately, like, this is what we should see. And unfortunately for Maverick, we're not seeing that. And I can't remember the exact wording. You block so much of it out, don't you? But essentially said he was deaf. And I was holding him, and I just looked down, and, like, just one tear rolled. Like, I'm quite an emotional person, but I just had that one tear. And I think it wasn't that much of a shock. I was sad.
It's almost like you'd prepared yourself prior, and I feel like this was a little bit similar to me too. I had the feeling already there, and so you'd already gone through almost like a dress rehearsal.
Yes. So you were still sad when you got the information, but I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't shocked. I don't think I was shocked by the news. And anyway, so I can't remember at what point. I think it was this one after this audiology, or maybe the next one was when we got, like, both cochlears, but, like, sensorineural and all of that information. We walked out in the hospital that we were at, have a big grand piano in the main foyer, and my husband went to the toilet, and he came back, and I was bawling my eyes out. And he was like, what happened? Like, he didn't get why. Again, we sit so different on the spectrum of emotions. He thought something immediately had happened, or I'd gotten a phone call or something, because we didn't have my older boy with us for those appointments. So he was like, what happened? And I just was like, he's never going to hear this. And he's like, hear what? And I'm like, the piano. He's never going to hear music. Like, what if he never hears music? And, like, then it hit me, like, of what deafness could mean. But Ben being the practical man he is, and they had already in that session talked about cochlear implants.
Yeah.
Like, he must have just ticked the right boxes or whatever, that she kind of said there's these devices, and, if you're a candidate, which so far some of his boxes tick, gave us the basics information on cochlear implants. And so for Ben, it was like, well, we'll just do that and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So, he probably will hear the music and stuff like that. But that was kind of my only really big grief process around it. That moment, I remember calling my sister then on the way to the car, and she was like, "Oh, what was the outcome?" And I'm like, "No, he's deaf." I don't think I cried. I was like, "Yeah, he's
Yeah.
deaf." Got home, my in-laws live across the road, like literally our driveways meet, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and we walked up their driveway, and it was really, for me, really played down, and I'm not sure why, but they were like, "Oh, what's the outcome?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, he's deaf as, like, can't hear anything." But I didn't cry, and I don't know. It's not
I feel
exactly
like
the reaction I
again,
thought.
that's that you sort of, as someone who also has anxiety, you do sometimes go through all the feelings already. Like you almost want to almost speed it up a bit. Like I want to go through all these feelings now so that I can just get on with it. I just need to get on to the next thing. And this is my
Yeah.
the same thing. And so maybe that was you actually had already gone through the big waves in isolation. And
And
so
just intuitively, like even mentioning when he was in utero at 7, 8 weeks that I had that pull already that he was going to be different.
mm,
Maybe that's what's something to do with it. I don't know. But yeah, so we kind of did all those testings, then started the phone calls for the children's hospital and that process of going down there for the CHIP clinic and the ENT and
yeah.
audiology and hearing Australia and things like that. So that happened quite quickly. I don't know what the timeline is for everybody, but
Yeah, so so obviously speeding through those early diagnostics and all the things that we as parents all really resonate with. What age, so you sort of decide on cochlear implants, and then what age was Mav officially, I guess, implanted and then switched on?
yeah, so officially diagnosed deaf at just before 4 weeks old, and then he got hearing aids at 9 weeks. He was
Mhm.
hearing aided by 9 weeks old.
Mhm.
And then he had to go down the pathway of the cochlear implant candidacy. But his surgery was 8 months old and switched on a week later.
Yeah.
So relatively like quick. And we were just really, really lucky to have such a smooth, like yet hard, still hard, particularly on the parents and the mum, I think, like the acceptance of him being deaf and things like that, but a relatively smooth journey. So even going back to like he got the hearing aids at 9 weeks old. I think my first session with you was 6 weeks. He was 6 weeks old, so pre even going to the hospital.
And this is
And
what I talk about with you all the time. I'm like, you are the only parent. You are the only parent I have ever had who has found me particularly, and I'll say this, particularly a parent who is going down that CI route. Like there's, we do have these different paths that people take. You found me and you booked an appointment with me before you even had approved NDIS funding. And I was like, I remember meeting you thinking, wow, she's going to change the world for this little boy because you just were so on the front foot. It's like you were so ahead of so many parents who would have been in the same situation. And I just still think about that first meeting with you and how all the questions and just wanting to know as much as you could and soak it all up. And I just think that that is such a beautiful quality that you have.
thank you. Yeah, that is in my personality. I should also say I'm an early childhood educator and have worked in the early intervention space. So this is my passion,
Mm.
as well as like my children are my everything. So for me, it came naturally to throw myself into every bit of research really early. So I met with you before he was aided. I went to a play group here on the Sunshine Coast called Hearbubs and met other families when he was 8 weeks old. So before he had hearing aids, I wanted to talk to everyone. I found some beautiful ladies that are on in this space and our RB club really early in the piece and was messaging them because they had cochlear implanted children or like similar what I predicted our journey was going to be, had what I thought it was going to be, and I followed their accounts and spoke to them. And so much research I just did, even between those audiology appointments, like those three-hour sessions. I was reading so much that when she was talking about the anatomy and the different variations, like the sensorineural and bilateral, like just all these words, I had read about it. So I
Mm.
could kind of just take that information in, which I think helped with the overwhelm. You're not getting all of this information and grieving the news you're getting and things like that. I could just focus on the facts and not be too overwhelmed. So yeah, I did all of that. I think the biggest and the hardest part for me was 11 weeks old. I mean, it was all hard. I just talk about this now like it was quite easy. In that time, I lost my grandmother. I had a funeral. My little one started kindy. Like it was a hectic time.
Yeah.
So it was still very emotionally hard. But in terms of Maverick's deaf journey, like we made some really good gains and progress quickly. But at 11 weeks old, we found out why Maverick is deaf. And so Maverick was born with congenital CMV, cytomegalovirus. And that was a way harder diagnosis to get than him being deaf. I think I'd come to terms with him being deaf. That one was hard. There's a lot of guilt. I'm sure other CMV mums feel this about, for me, not being able to protect him, that I should have done something differently. I like to know the why behind everything. So I would have liked to know where I caught it and all of that information, but I had to let that go. But obviously for CMV too, the unknown risks that can still come, that's hard, and that is still hard to this day. And Maverick has multiple diagnoses now. He has 5, I think.
What are those?
So Maverick is congenital CMV and deaf. He has hypertonia, gross motor delay, I think quite significant. He's less than a 5th percentile for his age, and a vestibular hyperfunction disorder. So there's a few things going on for Mav that contribute to, how he presents and stuff like that. But that all of that, it almost makes the deafness the easy part.
Funny, isn't it? When you sort of, because I think as well, you hit the nail on the head. Like deafness is in a lot of ways, obviously the trajectory can change and be so different for every kid, but deafness is deafness. Permanent deafness is permanent deafness. And so I think that's sort of like, in some ways, there's a certainty there around what you're dealing with. Whereas CMV, particularly when you talk to so many mums in that space, is the, as you said, the unknown, because every CMV kid is so different in how they present and what is going to impact them. And so I think that would have been really, really, really tough.
Yeah, and the extra testings you have to do, like we have to do the 3 different testings to get his cerebral palsy risk factor, which is low risk for Maverick, which is lovely. We didn't do a MRI. You know how they offer the feed and wrap quite early?
Yeah.
We chose not to because we had already really kind of been advised we'd go down the cochlear, chose to go down the cochlear implant pathway. He was also just a terrible sleeper. I was like, I'm not coming all the way to Brisbane to have to come back. I just don't think we'll get through a feed and wrap.
Yeah.
And because I knew we were headed down that cochlear implant pathway, that he would need one for that candidacy anyway to see his anatomy. So we just did both then. But yeah, just the unknowns are really hard, and that it could still pop up. A lot of things could still pop up. He's doing really well. Maverick's doing really well on both journeys, CMV and deafness. But things could pop up at any time from the CMV side. So that's stressful. Yeah. But yeah, so then it was like July, August of that year that we did the MRI. Like we went to Brisbane, we did the MRI. The case was presented like that Friday. I think they had a decision by like the Monday. And then I want to say a week later or 2 weeks later, I was at a play group with the company that supports our journey, and they checked in with the hospital, and we had a tentative date in 12 days time. And I was like, 12 days time, like, my goodness. And yeah, and then that tentative date went ahead. So so he had surgery at 8 months old. And I listen to these podcasts, all of the stories you've had, and do the research and speak to a lot of different families and stuff. And choosing cochlear implants was never terribly hard for my family. It was quite an easy journey, a decision to have made. And the only freak out I really had was the week of his surgery. I remember ringing my audiologist saying, cancel the surgery. He can hear with his hearing aids. It's fine. Because he'd said mum the week before surgery, and we were led to believe he didn't have access to those sounds and things like that. And I was like, no, he can hear better than we thought. We need to do more testing. But I think that was the panic kicking in and the reality of it all kicking in. And they walked me through that, even if he's getting that access, he's not getting access to the whole speech range. And that for him, the CIs are the better pathway. So we got off that phone and went ahead.
It's very common to sort of, particularly leading up to the surgery, where there is that, even if it's a small element of doubt, it just really rears its ugly head as that surgery date gets closer. And I know so many families who are the same. I wanted to sort of go into a bit of a communication language question now around, I guess, you've got the CI, you've done the CI route, and he has been implanted. But so you obviously engaged with me super early, knowing, I guess, that I was definitely a bilingual advocate, and I really believed in Auslan as being part of the intervention plan. So what sort of led you to include Auslan as well as going through the CI route, and why did you think it was so significant to have these options sort of for him?
Yeah. So, like you said, we spoke really early. And I guess so much respect speaking to you coming from this professional space, but also the lived experience, having a deaf child yourself space, and working with deaf children forever. But then the people I was reaching out to too, I learned quickly that CIs weren't going to be his everything, and that they break and that they fail and that the background noise. So I got all that information like way before we went through the therapy stuff that we had to do pre-implant surgery. And it just made sense. Everything you were saying, everything I was following, and then I reached out and spoke to other deaf people that I started to meet, and yeah, learned the fact that they're a device and they fail and they break. And we have just this month had both processes break and both Rogers break, and he doesn't like to be unilateral. So when one's been off, he takes the other off. He's also got hand, foot, and mouth at the moment, so he's sick. So he's not wearing his devices. So thank God for Auslan. It's just been, yeah, such a godsend. But I did my intro one to Auslan community course at about 15 weeks. He was about 15 weeks old when I started that. I knew a little bit from being in the early childhood space, but it's funny because we used to try and learn for daycare and other kids, and I just couldn't get it to stick. I could never remember the signs. But man, when your priorities shift,
Yeah.
you can remember the signs. My Auslan journey was hard too. I really struggled until he was understanding and reciprocal. Like I struggled to sign to him as a baby, like not understanding how much he took in, or I felt a bit fumbly and a bit different signing. I still struggle to sign in public a little bit. Not so much from people watching me, just from an overwhelmed perspective. I generally have two kids in public. It's hot. It's like, CIs are coming off on, like, it's just hard to, and Maverick is quite, I have to still physically like help him with a lot of things because of his balance disorder. And at the moment he's facing a lot of big behaviors. So I have to hold him, give that deep pressure, and I just don't have my hands. So
Totally. I think I think you've just hit so many things that other people will really resonate with. I think one of the big ones is that the signing in public, I think, is a big one. I think that a lot of people really struggle with that, a lot of parents, and it may be that overwhelmed, but it can also be the eyes and the stares and the things like that. And I think that's just voicing that, I think, is going to be really comforting for a lot of families, because sometimes you do feel like you're the only one who's going through that and having to try and navigate. And you're also starting to think in two languages, which is really, really fatiguing.
it's hard work.
Yeah.
Absolutely hard work. The other thing too is like when he signs back to me in public, I'm like, cool, let's keep going. I'm so proud. I'm like, yes, let's show everyone this is a language. When he doesn't, I'm like, come on, mate. Like people, the stereotype around Auslan is that it's not a language. And so when he doesn't reciprocate, I'm like, you're just supporting them. Like sign something back to me so they know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
What you said too as well about and I want to make this point, is it's really common for families to also be sort of deflated because they're not getting anything back from their child. They're like, come on, I'm just giving you all these signs, but I'm not seeing any signs. And I always just really encourage families to look closer. And because there can also be a lot of sign babble, there can be a lot of that pre-expressive sign where it's like they're actually are signing cognitively, they know what they're trying to sign, but it's obviously dexterity in hands and things like that. They're not actually producing that sign. And so a lot of the times those attempts at communication can be dismissed. And that's just really a message to the parents out there to look closer, because it's definitely there. And also receptive language has to build first before our child can speak or sign. And so I think that's a really nice message.
I don't know if you remember, but maybe he was sitting, he was quite young, but I sent you a video and I was like, is this sign babble? Because he was doing so much with his hands. And my husband was like, every baby does that. And I'm like, no, I think this is working. And I sent you the video and you were like, that's absolutely sign babble. And I was like, oh, phew, okay, we're making progress.
Yes, it's an intentionality in the hands as well. You just see the difference. And I've got loads of videos of Frank sign babbling where it's so intentional.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was our Auslan pathway. I did the intro one, and then I did intro two kind of as he had surgery because I missed the last week because he was in surgery. And then I am halfway through my cert two in Auslan at the moment.
I do have a question about advocacy that I wanted to chat about. Basically, this is a big thing for us as parents of deaf kids or parents with a child with a difference. Like we are constantly advocating. I feel like the minute they're born, we're advocating. So what has your experience been in the advocacy space for Mav? Like, what's that journey been like for you?
Hard, as everyone's would be. I don't feel like I advocate well until I like stop to look at his results. And I realize that has probably been because I've been advocating very passionately and hard from very early on. And I guess because I got so much information, even when I went to that first hospital appointment, like the big one, where you're just assessing everything, I already had a vision, a true north, as you would put it. I already kind of had a rough idea of he would be bilingual. So I didn't really face, and what I hear in a lot of other podcasts, I didn't really face that don't sign, don't do this approach, because I kind of went into a lot of appointments respectfully listening, but like we're going to do both approaches with Maverick. I didn't really give them the option to give me the feedback. I think I only had one person comment around signing, and it still wasn't not to do it. It was that you wouldn't find people, he could be walking around all day to find someone to sign back, which is not the truth. I sign and someone comes up to me all the time and starts signing back, and I'm like, they're everywhere, which is great. But yeah, so I didn't realize I was advocating. I actually probably didn't realize that was advocacy in the beginning until I did like the boot camp and things like that and looked at what advocacy is. So it's been a lot mentally for me as a mum.
Mm-hmm.
However, for Maverick's journey, it's been quite smooth, I guess. And I guess that's probably why some of it has gone quite smoothly for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You, and I think we always talk about that, setting the tone early, and that's exactly what you did. You set the tone from the very beginning that this is our philosophy. And when you say something, that you say it with conviction. And so I think you go into these appointments and people are like, yeah, okay, we're not going to mess with her. She's told us what she wants and we're going to respect.
Whereas in my head, I do not say it with conviction. But even actually, when I sign, I don't think I sign well, but I just did some of my assessments, my cert two, and I watched the video back and I'm like, I don't feel like I look that good when I'm signing. Like it's a confidence thing for me that I really need to work on. But yes, I also had so many people's journeys to reflect on. When I did my introduction Auslan course, there was an older man there who had one hearing aid, one CI, and was a hearing person originally. And he was just the best person to speak to because he'd had all three pathways and he enjoys his CIs. Yeah. He couldn't wait to get his second one. So I had those stories. I had that lived experience. I had information from professionals, and I had heard stories like yours and the people that are speaking on the podcast. I had heard the battles they come up against, so I was prepared for all those battles.
Yeah,
I went into approaching these companies with keeping in mind that they either don't support bilingualism or they recommend this or that, or that these people don't like CI. You know, like whatever the thing was, I was prepared, I guess.
Yeah, and I think honestly, man, you're like the epitome of knowledge is power. I swear, like you should just like have a like bumper sticker on the
Sometimes
back.
too much knowledge is works against you, doesn't it? But
yeah, I can feel that. I feel that resonates.
yeah.
For me, it was like when we found out about Frankie, about 100 different kids came into my, who I'd taught and, experiences I knew about. And it was just, knowledge can be sometimes that overwhelm. I think something I think has helped me, even though I sort of lead the group, but I feel that our community of parents that we're having growing in the RB Club, but also just through our friendships that we've created. I don't know whether you feel the same, but I just feel like that has honestly been like such a lifeline.
It has been the top of my list of my lifeline, like having people that understand the journey and, have the nuggets of wisdom to pass on, especially in the RB Club. I feel like we're on the younger age group. Maverick's one of the younger. And I just can't tell you how much this space has been the reason we've advocated and done well, I think, because I can pull pieces from those other people's journeys and be like, okay, that worked for them, that didn't work for them. In the beginning, that was overwhelming because I don't think I really felt confident yet in our journey. Now I can be like, oh, that wouldn't work for our family situation, or that wouldn't work. I'm getting better at that. But knowing it all, and this is something me and my husband differ on, I guess, is because I'll come out with, but this child did this is how it went for this child. And he's a glass half full kind of person. So he's like, but it might not be for Maverick. And I can recognize it won't be, but I like to have that in the back of my mind that could happen.
Yeah.
So we can work to do the early intervention to prevent that from happening. And Maverick's in so much early intervention. A lot of people say I'm going to burn him out and things like that. I'm very guided by him though. But for me, early intervention is a passion, but also if it, like, the whole point behind it is early intervention. So I'm throwing everything at him, but it's like his last language assessment when he was 2, he came in at 2 years, 6 months and 2 years, 7 months for expressive and receptive language. So when people say you're doing too much, I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else, and I won't do anything else because look at the results there. His gross motor is not so advanced, but we're doing everything we possibly can. And I know when he's an adult, I can say, I gave you everything, mate. Just like hearing with his CIs, Auslan without his CIs, every therapy I could think of. I just want him to know we did everything.
Doing it all. You honestly are. And I think it's that front load intervention that we talk about, that like really intense intervention in the first couple of years, whatever that intervention looks like for your child, just throwing everything at them, because I always say, as parents, we need to be doing the hard work now so that they don't have to do the hard work later. It is that ultimate sacrifice, which we would do every day over and over and over again. But you are honestly just so motivating. And I know you're just going to hit home for so many parents in this episode, because you share with such passion. And I know that you were nervous coming into this podcast, but you spoke so beautifully and you shared so much wonderful stuff. And I'm so grateful for you. And I think just to end, and I always ask this as we leave, do you have any little nugget of advice or piece of wisdom you would like to pass on to any new parents on the journey who might be listening?
I guess it's just a big summary of what I've said pretty much. But my biggest thing is ask the questions. Like, just so ask so many questions. Don't leave your audiology appointments if you don't understand something. And I mean, sometimes we leave and questions come up, but email, ring, ask, make sure you understand as much as you possibly can, because I think that's how you get the results, and the lived experience. Talking to people, living the experience is just everything.
Thank you so much, Nick, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.